Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. Today, we're going to go a little bit outside of the comic book. We're going to talk a little bit more movie review. I think we kind of all fit into the nerd kind of thing on this channel. And so,
Although they do have a new comic out.
do have a comic related to this coming out with Dune. And so, me and Mike have seen some videos on this. We just thought we'd kind of throw our 2 cents in. And it's a debate that's been going on for a long time since this book debuted, but almost 60 years ago ish, or maybe a little older than that.
1965.
Yeah, so it's almost 60 years. And that is whether or not Paul Atreides is a hero or a villain, or does he fit somewhere in between? What we'll do, we are just going to go with the material presented from the 2 films that have been out so far. And then we'll touch a little bit on the first Dune book. I know there are other Dune books. I've read some of those. Mike's read some of those. Without just kind of going off what the movies presented so far, do we think does Paul kind of fit into a
The
hero,
hero
a villain, or
or the
something in
villain?
between? So, Mike, I know you kind of you've been into Dune longer than I have. The
Yes,
first Dune book in high school, and then I
right.
read it a couple years ago, and I've seen both the movies a few times. But just kind of your 2 cents. What do you think on this? Do you think Paul fits more as a hero or a villain, or how would you kind of draw the line on that one?
Well, in the movies, he is, of course, and of course, in the first book, he is the hero of the story. He is the protagonist. He does have his faults. He's very human, but I understand. Later on in the story, he is takes on more of a, he's the quintessential anti-hero, right? He didn't want that job, but he kind of knew he was destined for it. He didn't believe in his destiny. He's not sure if he believes in the Bene Gesserit prophecy or the Fremen prophecy at all.
Yeah.
But then you kind of understand that things have been manipulated behind the scenes to put him in a place where he could make a difference. And of course, he's up to the task and uh, becomes the hero. So I think in that sense, you have to say he's definitely the hero.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Paul is that and I'll have to give Herbert a ton of credit. And I know he's done a lot of interviews and things saying that a lot of his book is a warning about charismatic leaders,
Yeah.
about falling under their sway, about the problem of once someone's a hero, how much are you willing to kind of just fall to what they say? And I think there's some good messaging in that. I think one of the interesting things with Paul is I leave the theater from these 2 films and that I really don't know that what he did is all that wrong, but I also can't like sit there and go, "Oh, that was, like he's clearly heroic." I think one of the most, and this is where I give a ton of credit to the film, the part where he goes into the kind of Fremen meeting and kind of takes over and like says, "No, like I am the Lisan al-Gaib" and all that stuff. That scene was so well done and so
Yes.
cool to witness because you're sitting there in the audience yourself and you're like, I don't really know that he's good or bad for doing this. And that like there's part of you that understands fully what he's doing. And then there's also part going, oh, he's kind of taking advantage. I think one of the things that's interesting for me is there's people who will say he's a villain on it. And part of me looks at it and goes, I understand, he's treated by what he does, he triggers a holy war that is going to claim a lot of lives. At the same time, it's not exactly like the situation prior to him taking charge is good. You have a corrupt emperor who clearly, as we see in the story, is willing to wipe out basically commits a genocide against the Atreides, where he was willing to kill
Yep.
every single one of them because they challenged his authority. Uh,
And the Fremen, he's got
and
to
the
get rid of
Fremen,
them.
right? He partners up with the Harkonnens. He was willing to kill as many as he needed to. He kind of gives them permission to wipe out whatever they need. And so one of the interesting things is a lot of people kind of talk about, well, Paul triggers this war. While I would agree, yeah, it's really hard to get behind someone going, we're just going to do a full tilt war. Leaving things as the status quo
Is
is
not acceptable.
probably it wouldn't have been acceptable, and that like yeah, the emperor probably would have turned his attention to the Fremen anyway at some point, and
Oh
might have
yeah.
decided to wipe them out. So I don't think it goes with a lot of. I think that, and that's a brilliant storytelling thing. I think both of Herbert in the book, and then the way Denny Villeneuve presented the story is while I think you could easily say Paul is the villain, I think you could just as easily say he's the hero. And that I think he's simply just doing what I think he believes is right. I think the other part that's interesting for this to me, and I love the parallels between Dune and Star Wars. And that, like, when I was younger, people would say Dune, Star Wars was ripped off Dune, and I was like, no, it's not. And then when you watch the movie, you're like, eh.
Yeah, right. The
there's there
prophecy.
and I think the interesting thing is I've seen a lot of people compare Paul to Anakin Skywalker, kind of Darth Vader. And there are definitely some similarities in that kind of the chosen one prophecy thing and
Yeah,
access to with the voice or the force and these kind of things. I think the difference that I look at between the two, because I hate the analogy of the two, is that while yes, Anakin kind of crumbles under the chosen one and his mom being killed and being kind of driven by revenge and all of that, Anakin straight up becomes like a terrorist, murderer, villain who like is just pure evil, and it doesn't seem like Paul ever falls to that. He seems to be making choices that, while somewhat calloused and maybe based in decisions that cost people to lose their life, he's not trying to just rule the galaxy for his own kind of benefit. It almost seems like he looked at, I think in the book they reference it as like the golden path, and it kind of like this is the best way forward. Um,
yeah.
but
I think so too. I think, and I love the way the movie ended it, where you kind of see, the human side of Paul. Like if you were put in that position and given all that influence and authority, eventually you're going to crumble. And I think that was probably Herbert's idea, because you all get swept up in the initial movement and its righteous cause, but in the end, the human frailty, you
kind of
know, it kind of, ends up, tainting things, and it can go bad very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is a lot of what Paul's doing based on the films, and I think it's a through line in the book as well. But in the movie, his dad, Duke Leto, was very much trying to go to, go to where the Fremen were. He got there, and his idea was like, we're going to get the desert people on our side. Like he
Yeah,
kind of knew that was coming, and so in a way as well, Paul is kind of finishing his dad's work and that
yeah,
maybe his father wouldn't have gone the exact route that he did. But his dad was definitely trying to get allied with the Fremen, get them on their side, kind of get everything set up. And so I think there's part of that too, is like, I think, if you're the prophesied chosen one, they want you to be the chosen one. The Bene Gesserits kind of sets you up to be that. I think it's a little bit interesting when they kind of try to make him the out and out villain, and that whole family got killed, everybody got wiped out. You have an evil emperor is doing that. It,
yeah,
it's really good. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me when I watch this though is just the storytelling that Herbert did, and that it does present such great debate. And I think that's one of the coolest things is I completely get people who watch it who walk away going, man, Paul's shady. And then I also get people who watch it and go like, no, he's kind of heroic. I think it just goes to the strength of the storytelling so much.
yeah. I really, you got to hand it to him, and he's smiling up there somewhere, that we're still talking about it today, and
Yeah,
and that his son is still involved, and making comics and everything. And
comics
so,
and books, and yeah.
yeah, it's a great story. I can't wait, but I guess I'm gonna have to wait another 18 months
Might be
for.
another 2 or 3 years. Yeah. I think the last part we'll kind of talk about there was one major change to the movie from the book. And that was in the book, Chani is very loyal to him. And even when he marries the princess, she stands by his side. In
Yeah,
the movie, they have her very much side against him and
yeah.
go her separate ways. Mike, for you as an old school book fan and then watching the movie, what did you think about that decision and kind of how they handled that overall?
I'm torn about that, and I don't know if there were some other reasons to that, like, maybe Zendaya didn't want to do another movie, or maybe
Maybe she gets a different role, kind of a bigger, more solid role for the next film.
I kind of wonder if that wasn't the case, or if there was some other motive behind not following the story in that way. Would it be too complicated for an audience? You got to wonder if, like, maybe the suits took control or something.
Yeah.
Um, but you never know. We could come back and it would be an accurate portrayal of her character to feel really hurt at that moment. And
Hmm.
maybe in the third installment, she will come back and portray the character more closely to the book.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing will be where they take it in the third movie, in that like the way they set it up, it kind of seems almost like Shawnee would be hunting for him. In that, like, in
Yeah,
that speech part where he takes over the Fremen, she when he like says no one can challenge me, she's like ready to go. Like she gets up, like she's about, they have Gurney kind of have her sit down and be like, hey, not now. And then Gurney kind of gets swung to his thing once he puts the signet on. I think it'll be interesting in that, based on how the movie presents it, Shawnee's kind of a wild card in that, like, based on how they set up the story, it would seem almost like she would be going after Paul in the third movie, which would be a massive change to the source
right.
material. And so
I
I
think
think
it would be.
that's
I,
interesting.
I think it would be wrong to go that way. But maybe she's bowing out of the role, and they're just going to take it from there and write her out. Um,
Mhm.
but I think that would diminish the story a little bit because it is a great relationship that they have. Was built up. So
Yeah, no. Uh, Again, I'll say 100% on this. Just credit to everybody involved, with both obviously Herbert with the original book, and then Villeneuve and Zendaya and Timothy Chalamet and all the people involved in the movie. And that they did such a good job of building that relationship through the movie. And
it
then
was so cool.
you kind of have it break at the end, and you're torn as an audience member. And I think that's one of the coolest things that this does is, conceptually, I think it raises some interesting questions. I know Herbert was a little more clear of like, no, Paul's not the hero was his intent, but I
Yeah,
think it kind of shows the power of sometimes of human beings and the imagination and the story, and that one person's interpretation of it, you can kind of take it different ways and go with it. But we thought we'd just kind of throw our 2 cents on that. It's been an interesting topic we've kind of kicked around, and as these movies both are kind of hitting Blu-ray and things like that soon here, just interesting to kind of revisit that. Let us know what you guys think below. Do you think Paul falls as a hero, a villain? Is he kind of in between, like I guess the anti-hero thing? And just what did you think overall? As always, we appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you in our next video.
thanks everybody.